I'm Tony Riddle, and this is the NatLifePod, a platform for conversation to help close the gap between wellness as an industry and wellness as a state of being. Big shout out to this episode's sponsor, XL Coffee. XL are renowned organic coffee producers here in the UK who have gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure their coffee is mold-free and has kept its antioxidant potency. XL are waking up the world of coffee. I'm a big fan and recommend you go give them a try. Use discount code NatLifePod at checkout. Details are in the show notes. On this week's episode of the NatLifePod, I'm behind the mic with Ruby and Christabel, two sisters who are on one hell of a be the change personal and planetary mission. Both Christabel and Ruby Reed are super inspiring humans who, through a vision for embracing an interconnected existence, have created an incredible learning platform for finding deeper solutions for the challenges of our time. We unpack so much in this conversation. It's light and joyful, yet deep and insightful and incredibly meaningful. We hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did. Here they are, Ruby, Christabel. Hello, welcome to the NatLifePod.
Hi.
Great to have you here. How was the journey?
It was nice. We came from a friend's house in Cornwall and we used to spend a lot of time here when we were younger, so it's nice to be back. What feels like home. Yeah.
Are you going to get a bit of time after this?
Maybe we can jump into the sea.
Yes.
Go on. Maybe we should all go.
Yeah, that would be nice.
We can get some B-roll.
Perfect.
Beach B-roll.
Skip and jump into the ocean.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love that you're here, by the way.
Yeah. Feels really good.
I love all that you do. And I wanted to get you on here to share all that you do. It's a real privilege. It was a real privilege to be at Medicine on your stage and be the one that was up on the stage being invited. So I thought, here you go. You can have a little bit of that pressure now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe we can start with, who should we start with? Who's the eldest?
Me.
Ruby. I have an idea. How about this? Do you both want to speak to Advaya, or does one of you want to speak to Advaya and one of you speak to earth.co?
We both speak to both.
And those that you're listening to this, you'll get to know what they're about in a second.
We're quite good at filling in.
What
like one starts and then the other one fills in and then the other one
Just
fills
like Lola and Millie. They finish each other's sentences.
Old married couple.
Their plates.
Get the telepathy really in check.
So I first met you, Ruby, I think it was Ibiza. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And you were staying at Minty and Matty's at that time and working out a project.
Yes.
And I think the first time we actually spoke, I was on a podcast. At Project. I'm sure I was shooting a podcast that day. And you came out. And that was our first intro.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was early days then.
Yeah, I still have that office.
Yeah.
In the climbing wall. And then always there's like loud drum and bass in the background. It's like, is that your office? Like, yeah, sorry. It's also a climbing gym.
And are you still connected to Ibiza in that sense?
Yeah.
I
live there. Yeah. I spend probably half the time in Ibiza, half the time in England. It's just nice to be able to swim every morning and have that sense of connection with the water, which I don't get when I'm in London.
And the community there, I guess.
Yeah, amazing community.
That gives you a real sense of community there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you find the energies between Ibiza and England?
How do I find the energies? Well, genuinely, it's just being able to swim in that water every single day that keeps me so grounded there. And that's so unique and so special. And putting my head under the water, surrounded by Posidonia and that red rock, and swimming and feeling so free and so held and safe. And it's like the most healing practice that I could ever dream of. And I feel so unbelievably lucky to be able to do that every day. And that for me is the defining quality of Ibiza, and like lying on the red rock with the sun and just that is such an amazing feeling. And nothing, it's really hard for me to feel that when I'm in another natural environment. Like I can be in the forest, like I can be in the woodland, and I'm connecting with I feel like I'm trying to connect with my environment, but my thoughts are still in my mind, and I still feel separate. But then there's something about being in water where that all goes, and maybe it's because it's been like a long practice of mine to spend time in water, and so I'm like faster at that place. But also I think there's something about the vulnerability of being pretty much unclothed, and in all senses of the word, and also being held in all senses of the word, and so yeah, that is the special thing for me about Ibiza and the energy of Ibiza. And then being able to carry that through in my day, or whenever there's a difficult moment, I know it's okay because I can just go and lie on the rock and lie in the water and
Find yourself.
Yeah. Or forget myself.
Nice. And it's free.
And it's free.
Yeah. Closing the gap between wellness as an industry and wellness as a state of being. You don't need to carry on, really. We've nailed it just in that. There we go. Just get to see and lie on the red rock and we're done. That's nice. How about you, Christabel? Are you in the forest? Are you in the water? What does it for you?
I have a slightly different experience in Ibiza. It's slightly different.
Go on. Because it is an island of polarities, right?
It is. I can't say that that's my experience when I'm there. No, I love Ibiza, but I tried living there. My boyfriend grew up there, and we spent a year living there, and it was wonderful. But I felt like my bones didn't rest easy there in the same way that they do when I'm in Cornwall or in England or Wales. And I feel like it's something about my constitution or, I don't know, ancestry. I feel like a lot more rooted when I'm in the UK. But I love Ibiza. I love that Ruby's there. I love that my boyfriend's family live there and we have lots of friends. But yeah, it's definitely a place I go and party as well as swim.
It's an interesting island, right? Right. When we lived there, I was still having to make my way into London, so I still have to keep getting flights, and I was battling with oh my God, putting this message out there, but you're flying in and out, environmental kind of message, but still jumping on flights regularly to fly back and forth. And then I land in London and the chaos of it. And then I had 3 or 4 days and then cram everything in that time to get back and see Catherine and the kids. And they were just properly immersed in it, really tuned in. And that was quite jarring in a way. At the beginning, it was the romantic period of it. Loved it. And this concept, I'm going to Ibiza, and then drop into the community. And then I just found it, just the two environments that frequent, that shift was too jarring. And then I found that, in this, like Cornwall for me is much more grounding for me. I really drop in. Sometimes in Ibiza I feel like I'm like in a vortex somewhat.
Yeah.
And I need to find areas to be able to pin myself down again.
Feels quite disconnected from like, this is such a personal thing, but from a sort of bit more kind of like rough movement building, it's an amazing place where I feel people are able to manifest visions.
Hugely.
But kind of because they've already had a certain amount of success, and then the ability to sort of manifest there. I'm massively generalizing. And so I find there's this like deep connection, but also a feeling of disconnection, a bit of a like retreating away from the world rather than sort of being in the world. But then it's also a bit of a silly binary because, that is also like the, localization and just building beauty where you are. It doesn't need to be like this, kind of global perspective all the time. But I think when I was living there, I felt that a little bit. And just speaking to what you just shared about being in 2 different places, I find that really hard, even just me and my partner in Sussex, but traveling to London like a few nights a week. And even that I find it really ungrounding. It's only an hour and a half away. But I think, yeah, you want to be, I want to be like rooting down in one place.
Yeah, I think now, if I had the modalities I had now, it would have been easier to navigate it. I wasn't so into the down regulation understanding of that so much. I had it, but had I embodied it? No. I put my hand up now. Accountability? No. And now when I visit London, I work with that breathing app, 4-6 Tempo, and then I walk through London with an awareness of my breath, which is 4-6, and I slow my pace by 10%. And it's this crazy feeling like there's hyperlapse, right? People are like crazy around me, really rushing, and you're just cruising through it. And that's really helped.
Yeah.
You know? So there's tools now I recognize that I can enter different environments with and try and at least remember some part of that being in the sea or lying on the rock.
There's something interesting, though, about islands and living on an island and what that then means in terms of how you locate yourself and your community and your like way of living and being. Because you have a boundary and everything is within the boundary and within that space.
Great one.
And so you see people a lot more, you bump into people everywhere and you're continually having these moments of connection. And it means that you build a much broader like fabric around you, which you're part of. And there's a lot more opportunity for spontaneity and also for supporting each other. Like if you need a drop to the airport, or if you need to look after someone's kid, or if you want to like spend an afternoon like doing clothes swap, or like, but it's much faster to organize these things.
Yeah, we're quite fluid, right?
Yeah, fluid. And in England, you need to kind of plan and date and things feel a lot more complicated and more difficult because you don't have that proximity. And that's something I love about living in this island space, is the proximity of the community and people, but in like not in a contrived way.
Yeah. I guess Cornwall feels a bit like that because it's so far away from everything that it brings in that closeness of community. How did you land in Ibiza? How did that happen?
We grew up spending summers there.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So we've always been spending time there. And it was always a dream to be able to live there. But we were doing these big events in London. And so I didn't think we could because we were doing quite regular. They were like two a month. And
what were the events?
Advaya.
That was Advaya. Okay.
Yeah. We started Advaya in 2015 and had been teaching yoga and things as well before.
How old are you now?
31.
34.
Wow, really early days then.
Yeah. So we were teaching yoga and I had clients in London, so I couldn't really live in Ibiza. And then suddenly when COVID happened, it was like permission to, like, a dream that I'd always had could suddenly become reality, and moved there straight away.
What was the original vision around Advaya? Okay, let's start here. Unpack Advaya for those that don't know, because I keep saying it and we haven't got to what is Advaya? Who wants to go? Come on, Christabel.
Advaya is a transformative learning platform. So on the platform, we offer courses and programs, and we organize gatherings and program for different festivals in order to bridge inner and outer healing. So we look through the lenses of ecology, consciousness, and the body in order to orient ourselves towards systemic change, but of like within and without. And we started in 2015 with the vision, actually with no vision. We started in 2015 with an idea, like a feeling from our experience that, starting to dip into books like by Satish Kumar and practicing yoga and having these feelings of, like unity and like spiritual experiences. But where is the community in London, and why are me and my friends all having different levels of mental health issues and like drug taking and, just not fulfilling our human potential to be like fully present and like loving life. And that felt strange. So
how old are you, Christabel, when that dropped in?
There were different stages through yoga practice. For me, it was reading Satish Kumar's book, and he wrote the health of the planet and health of the people are two sides of the same coin. And I think because I was so like zoomed into suddenly like this well-being world and this kind of aspiring to be part of that. And then I was like, whoa, hang on, what's happening with the ecological crisis and climate change? And I was like lying in bed, getting stoned, watching TED Talks about like the climate crisis and, a teenager. And I was like, there is so much for us to do. And it just felt so isolating and alone. And so we started to organize these events where we bring people together with like be multifaceted with different speakers and well-being in the morning.
Multifaceted was our favorite word.
Yeah, I just want to saying it again. Multifaceted events. But we'd have like...
I know all about multifaceted events.
Yeah, you're king of them. So we'd have like, yoga and meditation in the morning, and then there would be like vegan lunch, which we're really into. And then there would be different talks in the afternoon, and then there'd be music. And so it would be, if you were into the band, you'd come for that, and then you'd experience yoga. If you were into like that more activist-oriented talks, you might experience meditation, So just trying to bridge these
There were
different
things
worlds.
you loved anyway that you were then pulling together.
Yeah, we would choose like a theme. So and they were quite big. Like our first ever event was 200 people, and then we'd choose a theme. So it'd be like the mind and the body, and be looking at the interrelationship between the mind and the body, and how we can move beyond our like conceived limits. So then we'd invite world champion freediver. We'd invite like a spiritual, like we'd just invite a different spectrum of people and with different expertise, and a very young crowd who had never heard a lot of what was being spoken about. And we just wanted to shift and reframe how we were all seeing the world around us and our role within it, so that we could think about like actively building and co-creating this like ecological and spiritual regeneration that we were all dreaming of, but like in very isolated ways. And so at that time, it was like very much what's called Morning Gloryville, like the sober raves were a thing, but we weren't part of that scene. We were more like, we'd cut together with our friends, and it would be like very, what's it called? Self-sabotage. Is that the right word?
Sure.
Well, like, just like not positive vibes in that way. Just like positive vibes, but like self-harming, like drinking alcohol, drugs.
Sorry, that's what you were getting together and doing?
Before.
That was Advaya. Before Advaya.
So we wanted to think about how we could get together and build these beautiful spaces that were the opposite of that.
Yeah, the healing spaces.
Healing spaces. And...
Which is a great thing to recognise so early in the day, right?
Yeah.
If I think of my 20s and 30s, it's all that. Just the booze and the drugs.
But
and
a few
took
years
the breakdown
before,
moment to change it, whereas you're capturing that well before that.
Yeah. But a few years before, like I had really isolated myself from a lot of those things. And I'd had like a few years of pushing a lot of people away and getting really intensely into my like physical practice, like my yoga practice, pranayama. I was practicing Ashtanga every morning, like cycling, and spending a lot of time in India. I'd been teaching scuba diving in the Andaman Islands, and just like really cut myself off a lot from my friend group, and having these experiences and then wanting to like share them. And Christabel also had been reading all these things, reading all these books. She was really into like Michael Meade and Satish Kumar, and I was really into these like physical practices,
physical embodiment of those practices
that I was experiencing personally. And Christabel and I, we were very much on our own separate life paths. Like she was also practicing yoga, and I was practicing yoga, and I was like, "Why are you practicing yoga?" Like we were just separate. Like we didn't know each other so well. We were very much on our separate paths that then suddenly came together for some reason. I think when Christabel was like, "Let's do a big event." And I was like, great, of course, I'd love to do that.
Because what happened is I was like, let's do this event, and then got like 15 like beautiful friends, but turned out like not so efficient with the actual organizing of the event. And then like on the day, I mean, they were They did some stuff. But then basically,
Just in case they're listening in now, Christabel.
we made some things.
Pom-poms,
exactly. But then and then it was like, I don't know, like that was like mine and Ruby's first time sort of working together, and I think that our differences had sort of kept us like not understanding each other or connecting so much growing up suddenly became like, whoa, together we can do all this stuff because of our differences, but because of like a deep intuition, which feels like actually very similar. And I don't think we'd ever gotten into that deep place in our teams.
So then we kind of wove together and went on a whole journey together, which has been really amazing.
Yeah, and that's been Advaya, and Advaya's sort of, it's like changed and evolved so much, but it's actually just stayed exactly the same. But I think because for the first like 6 years, there was no business plan or forecast. There was no sort of deck to explain what Advaya is. It was just us running events and supporting ourselves financially through teaching yoga, and then just always just us two.
Like building community was really central to it, like just bringing people together, and joyfulness was always really important.
Yeah, well, that comes from a real place of love then, right?
Yeah.
Because again, there's no financial interest in it because you're working your socks off behind the scenes and other things to help support it, right? Yeah, I can really relate to that.
We did nearly, I think, just over 200 events before lockdown happened in person.
Wow.
We did so many, all different kinds.
I had no idea you did that many events.
All different kinds.
Yeah, it was great. We used to do pilgrimages. So we'd do a pilgrimage to water, and we would start off at we did one source of the River Froome, and then we'd swim in every single wild swimming spot we possibly could until we got to Bath, and sleep in bell tents or in church pews.
With British Pilgrimage Trust.
With our friends.
Shout out. Love
them. Or we would take over a big venue in London, and always bringing together inspiring voices and hearts, minds, practitioners, different people.
Where's the vision with it now? At the beginning you didn't feel like you had distilled a vision. Is there?
Yeah. The vision now is so we just launched in August a new platform called Advaya.life.
Yeah.
The vision is to grow that with incredible learning programs around ecology, consciousness, and the body. So basically kind of how we can embrace an interconnected existence, how we can carve out lives of meaning and purpose and belongings, how we can explore the deeper solutions to the challenges of our time around biodiversity and mental health. So before launching this platform, Advaya.life, we were running all our online courses by building Squarespace websites and then having a back end. I mean, it's been such heavy lifting because we do so many of them as well, but it's because we had to save up to do this platform, and then the platform obviously took much longer than you ever think. Anyway, now it's live.
Yeah, but we frame it as transformative learning. So this idea of reframing how you see the world is still really, really cool. And it's when someone has a transformative experience and then they have an awareness of kind of ecological relationality or the interconnectedness of our ways, of ourselves, with our environments, with other people.
Remembering.
Yeah, exactly.
Of who we are, right?
Exactly. Remembering in its literal sense as well.
Exactly.
And so that's very much what all of our courses are about at the core, and that's what Advaya means as well. Advaya means non-duality, and it's this kind of awareness of our ecological sense of selves, and at the root of that is relationship. Yeah. So how are we in relationship to everything around us,
interdependence,
and within us? Yeah.
The meaning of that, right?
Yeah.
Is it donation based, Advaya?
No, it's not. But we do have unlimited bursaries and scholarships. So we have a really great, all of our cohorts are very international.
Yeah. How did the connection with medicine drop in? That's Medicine Festival for those that are wondering. Yeah, our friends were starting Medicine Festival, and one of them asked me to organise talks space. So that's how we started it. And first festival, there was an initial small one, a small gathering just with, I think, 100 people in 2019. And the first proper festival was 2020, I think, with 800 people. And now it's
like 7,000 4 years on.
It felt like 7,000 on this last one.
Yeah, it did.
Didn't it?
Yeah.
I'd never been before, and everyone kept saying that, and it still felt really small to me. I mean, not really small. It felt like an amazing amount of people, but I'd never been. So I was like, whoa, it's enormous. I was like, it's...
You're kidding me. Yeah. You can easily triple this. Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, we've just had that stage. Love having the stage. Such a highlight. Such an amazing opportunity to bring so many of the voices together who are within this space and who are really
and weave
thinking.
that together,
Yeah.
like that full personal planetary health. You really feel that.
And connect with people in person, because now so much of our work is online, which is
listening to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And kind of the antithesis. Kind of the antithesis of why we started, because it was, one of the big things for me personally was I want to create spaces where when you're sitting in a room, learning about the ecological crisis, you can look to your left and you look to your right and you can see everyone's engaged and everyone's listening. Everyone's there because they want to be there and they want to learn. And at that time, that just felt so lacking. Now it feels very different. Now I feel enough people actually get it. Like I think we're past the phase now. I think people have done a really great job of like ringing the alarm bell. I think now it's about how do you go from awareness to tangible solutions? How do you build the mechanisms to actually enable us to manifest a radical imagination? So it's tangent, but yeah, I think having those embodied spaces, and so we're excited to start doing that again with Advaya, and so bridging the online with in person, because it's so important.
Yeah, super inspiring. I mean, I didn't just want you here for the podcast. I just thought it'd be great for the Riddle kids to spend some time with you.
They're so cool.
Yeah. Lola, she's 14 now, and they're unschooled, right? So there's complete freedom to learn, pick up whatever they need to pick up. But Lola is in this path at the moment. Papa, I think I want to go to college now. So I've been trying to find colleges where they accept them at the age of 14.
Wow.
And then what dropped in is, what are you looking to study? And it seemed very mainstream kind of subjects. And I said, look, there's so much out there of really broadening your horizons and really setting yourself up for the way the world is moving and shifting towards. So I dropped them into earth.co as well, which we can
Nice.
Amazing.
to have a look at it and just see, okay, wow, there's this that's available. But it's great, again, knowing that there's then spaces to go to that you have Advaya, for instance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it is easy for things to just remain in the talk, like talking, and then not actually thinking about how that shifts into how we live. Like Christabel was saying, like tangible skills. It's not just the radical imagination, it's the skills or the practices that can bridge that.
Yeah.
So we were talking about medicine before, and I love medicine because it's like music talks, but then there's so many different spaces of practice and skills and like learning about like how to work with your hands and how to live in that way. And that was really important to Earth. And that's kind of why we ended up creating that.
Yeah, I had a massive breakthrough at medicine, which I need to thank you both for, because, well, firstly for getting there, and up until that point I was completely overwhelmed because I was training for an event, and I couldn't. It was so odd. Normally I'd be in this space of, I get to run today, and I was very much in I've got to get up and go and run. I've got to get up and go and run. And Katerina was like, are you okay, Tony? Are you sure you want to do this event? And picked up on it immediately, what was going on, I guess. Took me a little longer, but her feminine superpowers of intuition overtook mine. And I was battling with heart-led, what it should have been heart-led. And I was very much in my head and the responsibility. So I had a responsibility thinking about sponsors, my support crew, everyone that's involved in the event. And then there's I've got to go and run, and really I'm not running for those people, but I hadn't connected ultimately with the why I'm running, not the vision, but just the why. Why am I doing this? You had a clear why. And I was toying between men's work and personal planetary health, looking at environmental. and who to raise funds for. Because there's always a bigger picture for these events. It's not just about, my Tony has human potential. Let's see what records he can break by doing it barefoot, and the ego getting wrapped up in it. It's very much about ecosystem rather than just ecosystem. And I found myself at medicine for the first time in a long time, my blinkers off, like not in this tunnel of running. I'm running. And the family were there, of course. But having the talk to start with, being up on stage, thank you. And then the men's panel happened, the medicine and men's work that Zach had put together, right? Mm-hmm. That you had all put together. And then after that, I had made this connection. And so I'm now shaping up for just a month's time to take on the Southwest Coastal Path again, but we're doing it as a collective of men. Because of how important that work feels right now. And so rather than Tony's lone wolf attempt at running the Southwest Coastal Path, we're now putting it in and positioning it as we're running as the pack, and our motto is no man being left behind, and it's inviting all men to come and join, and it's chunked up to be marathons, like 26.2 miles per day. And
how many miles?
26.2 per day. So a marathon a day. But it's called the ManMen March for Movember. So each man, well, I've got to shave my beard off, which is going to be really tough. I mean, I must imagine it's going to be pretty tough for Bowman and Tallulah. They've never seen me without a beard. They'll be like, who is that guy? I might be very much like that. I'll go for an identity crisis for days. So we have to shave our beards off or just start growing a tash. And then we have the number of days out there. I think it's 24. We're starting on the 7th to finish on the 30th to cover all 630 miles. But it's a ManMen March. So the idea of no man being left behind is that if someone is struggling on that day, we all drop back to support them to get through that march that day. So it could mean a walk, it could mean a run, it could be a hobble, it could be crawling, whatever it needs to be. But we all do it together. But it really dropped in, getting back to it, to that panel, because afterwards I came off and my friend Chris was there and he said, how are you doing? He was listening in and what's happening right now. He was supporting for the event. And I then expressed just, my heart's not really in it. Okay, don't do it then. We need to be doing this and we'll shift it. And then eventually it dropped in after that event. I was interested in the men's work. Let's push it to November. It can become this ManMen March for Movember. I guess for me, it's what drew, because it was a massive shift for me. So I'm sure it was a massive shift for many men in the audience, right? And the statistics don't lie. Number one kind of cause of death for men under the age of 50 is suicides. It's a really important thing to put together. Yeah. But it's the first time, isn't it? There's men's circles at medicine, am I right? Or the first time there's a real light being shone on that work. And why did you feel drawn to putting it on, I guess?
There's medicine as a whole, and then there's the talk space. I think like Zach Avery is very involved in the men's workspace. And
I've asked Zach to come on here.
Have you? Yeah. And I think he wanted it to be a really big part of the festival as a whole. And so he invited like Michael Maisie to host the sweat lodges and like various other people. There was more venues this year. I think Windsgrove, was one of the venues that might have been, I didn't get to leave my stage very much, but I think that might have even been dedicated to men's work. I'm not sure. And then on the Advaya stage, like in previous years, we'd had talks around the feminine or like ancestral feminine or that type of work. And it just felt like a really important space to be held on the stage this year. Really wanted to get Zach to talk on the panel. And I really wanted him to hold it. And I think he was really probably hating me for it on that morning after having slept like 3 hours cumulatively over like multiple days.
I can relate to that. Yeah,
what am I doing here? I was like, you've got to do it. And
it was beautiful. My boyfriend was in the in the audience, and he'd never. It's funny because when you're like running Advaya and you're like immersed in this world, everything starts to just feel like really like normal and like beautiful, but like, you know, it's like part of the conversation that we're having all the time. And he was blown away by it and by the sharing and by how personal it was and how so it was so wonderful to see it, like you were just saying, you know, sure that there's people in that audience. And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons as well, like I love events that are in person and at festivals, because people just end up there by chance rather than online. You have to be very like intentionally like looking for something and then signing up to it.
I think it's also something different about holding it in a public space like that, is that these spaces are often like gendered spaces are kept isolated sometimes from broader conversation and broader awareness. But I think there's so much medicine in, like, I find as a woman that I understand myself better in relation with a man. And I can then call on my female friend or like my other friends in these more gendered spaces to share my experiences. But in terms of like my femininity, that I understand through the other side, through the masculine. And I that's like just my personal reflections. I'm sure it's different for everyone. And hearing the conversations around like the men's work panels, I think is so beautiful as a witness, as something that isn't about you, it's about the experiences of the people that you love. And in traditional circles, like in women's traditional in Dene traditions, for example, we do a lot of work with Pat McCabe in the past, and she would do holds women's circles, and the four corners would be held by the men who had witnessed, and that's a really beautiful quality, I think. And that's something that I felt in the space on the stage at Medicine. It wasn't a men's circle that was happening. It was a panel with different men sharing their experiences. But everybody was listening and everybody was witnessing and everybody was hearing a shared experience at the same time as very personal experience. And that is such a gift. And I feel like we need to have more of these spaces. There's a podcast by someone called Ian McKenzie called The Mythic Masculine. And that for a while was like the only podcast I wanted to listen to, which is funny because it's about the masculine, it's about the mythic masculine. It's like archetype, it's like archetypal. It's just like, and we ended up working with him. We did an online course with him called Restoring Masculinity. Like what is a deeper sense of the masculine beyond this like patriarchal domination-based paradigm, which tells a story that is actually so far divorced from the masculine. And how does that story do the masculine an enormous disservice? And how can we look beyond that to liberate the masculine, and in that process also liberate the feminine and everybody that exists? Because we are so confined by these binary understandings that are so simplistic and so far away from the fullness of what they are. So, yeah.
I love what Pat McCabe says, which is like we've no idea what the sacred masculine is, and we have no idea what the sacred feminine is because they are plugged into a power over paradigm. And so
we get unhealthy traits playing out within it, right?
And because in this power over paradigm, domination-based thinking and relating, rather than understanding spectrum and being able to see the whole interconnected, but a spectrum, everything becomes vertical. And so it becomes about strength or weakness or intuition and rationality or like penis and vagina or like, everything becomes so different rather than being able to sort of see the difference and see also the like complete interconnectivity that makes us all whole. And I think I love that because I've experienced some of the conversations around sex and gender to be stemming from a power over paradigm consciousness. And I love listening to Pat and how Pat talks about it, and Lila June as well, her daughter. Just such a radically different perspective. even though it's the one that I resonate with most deeply in my body, but it's not the one that I hear spoken about so much. And I think it's a powerful message.
Feels like an incredible time of healing, right? Isn't it? Like more so than ever, I would say. We had the 100 Human Experience at the weekend, which is partly why my voice is a bit like this right now, because of all the roaring and the yelling. But I had this idea within the timetable was to create men's and women's circles and then come together in ceremony, and we'd have cacao and we'd have an ecstatic dance. But it was positioned to go kind of on the Sunday, which would be the last day. And we come together so much, like really deep connection. Everyone was just having this incredible experience. I kind of started the ceremony with this real lighting of the fire, but this intention of love. And you could feel it like throughout the whole weekend. I voiced it in the WhatsApp group today, another WhatsApp group, to look at each day, like the ceremony, because it was so obvious to me that, we started this with love, and it was deep throughout the whole weekend that really, if we start our day with how we speak to ourselves and what we might be saying and what we might set our intention with is what we're going to be receiving throughout the day, and then how we close that. And so on the Sunday, which is traditionally this final day of the 100 Human Experience, it dropped in that we've come together, we're so connected. Why would we suddenly go off and then separate and then come back in? And it turned into a huge sharing circle, which is a little crazy. I've held circles here and we've had like 20 people and they've gone on for 6 hours. So what was I thinking? 100 people? It's like a day of sharing. But a lot of the women within that sharing had said how healing it was, getting back to the healing times, to be around conscious men and men that have been doing the work, let's say, and felt really safe and healing for them, you know?
Yeah.
Powerful times, right?
Totally. I think that's one thing is sometimes you worry about separating too much, like masculine and feminine. Are we like building into the binary? And I think sometimes we are. And I also think that those separate spaces can be for some people really important. You know, there's a lot of healing and trauma within women around sexual assault, and like most people I know have been sexually assaulted, including myself. And so there is like a safety where I don't know, there is something about the safety of being with women to be able to really open up.
Safe container for that.
And I think, you know, and we were at a friend's house recently, and some friends did surprised us with like a kind of women's circle. And then we were all giggling because we'd left the guys downstairs and we were like hoping they're cooking, but also cooking us dinner, and also hoping kind of feeling a bit like, oh, like we've left them out. But also, you know, afterwards, because of what was shared, I realized, oh no, it was actually really good. And that was for us. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about the separation. I know it's important, but I also think maybe like what you were saying, having this witnessing or actually being able to, because you don't want to.
But I think it's about having, but like I agree in having these spaces that is just women or just men, but then occasionally to be able to have the witness, I think is beautiful as well. But what's so special about them from my side is the creating. It's a very ceremonial experience. It's like the doors are closed, you're in this environment. What is said in the circle remains in the circle. And you're safe to share things you would never normally feel safe to share anywhere else. And for many people, when it does come to these things like abuse, they're kept secret. And from that place, you build these patterns of behavior that are then very hard to change. And normalizing the ability to talk and to share, especially when it comes to shame, is so important.
Yeah. 100%. One of the men came up after the panel and was asking, do you think men have trouble sharing vulnerability? And it's like, doesn't seem to be the case, really. It seems that they have difficulty finding spaces where they can, or relationships perhaps where they can. without shaming or ridicule or whatever else can come in. And it seems that it's simple acts like getting a fire going and just being around in a circle. And once one starts, this is equal to the whole, even at the weekend, again, once one starts sharing, you often see there's a thread or a theme that runs through it. And there's also the aha moments that you see on people's faces because they perhaps look to someone and think, oh, they've got their shit together. They really know what they're doing. Until then they start sharing and it's, oh my God, I have that. I have this going on. I have that going on. And then suddenly it becomes relatable. And then for the men within these circles that perhaps have trouble or feel that they might have trouble sharing vulnerability, you just open the door and it's incredible. And then again, every relationship changes around them. You know, that's the healing part of that journey, I guess, in creating spaces where, yes, they might not want to share with their partners, but what it does, it then, once they've shared, then they're prepared to share with their partners and those relationships around them and start encouraging others. You know?
Yeah. Creates almost like a new, like, neural, what's it called?
Neural?
Neural, I
Yeah.
can't say it, pathway of it becoming more natural and feeling more part of you rather than this sort of, you know, because people get, like, what do they call, like, vulnerability hangovers. You know, when you've been like really vulnerable and then you,
Or if I shared too
and then
much.
people going, you're like, how?
Yeah.
I say people, me. And actually just staying in, learning through experience that it is safe and it is okay, and just to stay with that.
Yeah.
Something on my mind is about intergenerationality and like the having different generations present and witnessing each other, I think is also quite beautiful. Often, like, my friend group is very mixed in ages, but usually you might have a friend group that's very, very similar in age. And then sometimes in these spaces, you do have a mixture and you do get to listen, especially in our culture where we don't have so many rites of passage. Like personally, transition from girl was really difficult. I found it really hard to say I wasn't a girl anymore. It was so strange. That was a difficult transition for me to make.
I think, again, that we can link that sometimes, I feel, to the school environment where we're operating at the same age group. We're integrated into the same age group. Really, community isn't like that, is it? The true sense of community is multi-generational. Even blue zones are multi-generational homes, right? We can look at that. But with the circles and the ceremonies and experiences we've been putting together and the riddle kids at every part of that, like in the closing one of this, 100 people in a circle singing "You've Got the Love," and I was with Tallulah and Beaumont in the middle, and they were just making eye contact with everyone, and then everyone came in and gave them an on bath, so they have a 100-person on bath, but they're around it and they see the experience. If I have circles again that they're sitting cacao ceremonies, or they'll be open to some of the discussions even, or the circles where people are sharing, they're familiar with it. Lola's 14, right? And something that really was quite potent for me, again, as a pupper, I would say, in terms of nurturing and a healthy relationship. We were in Somerset at the time, and Lola came downstairs and she went, "Guess what, Papa?" And I was like, "Tell me." She went, "I've got my period." And then it became a ceremony, right? And then it's celebrated, you know? And now Lola already refers to herself as a young woman, you know?
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's again, what's being normalized and what are we witness to? What are we observing?
Definitely. And I think it's more important. I mean, it's always been important, but it's more important than ever because of, like, the global need for us to reconnect with our vulnerability, with our ability to change, with our ability to self-reflect. And also, with a lot of young people having, you know, mobile phones and Instagram and TikTok, you are so exposed to so much. I feel the need for discernment and for knowing who you are is you need to know that younger and younger and younger, because there is just there's such a big world to get lost in through the online space. And I see it with, like, in my person, you know, my life with young people, addiction to screens, addiction to online community that's being built instead of in-person community. And I mean, I was listening to radio the other day and they were saying how having an online community, kids fared a lot better through lockdown. And I just thought how kind of sad and warped, but that's not because it was online. It was because there was nothing else for them. But yeah, I just...
Yeah, your world gets bigger, but it actually gets so much smaller.
It's a false. It's the need being met falsely, so we think our social need is being met.
Yeah,
that's it. But you can't. What about the energy that's exchanged within that? What about the wisdom that we carry in that sense?
Yeah,
Jasmine Hemsley, her and her partner Nick went to it was white goods, like Beco or something like that. They went to this conference and they had a speaker there, and he has an 80% success rate with predicting the future of tech.
Wow.
And so he went on this huge journey of, where they're going to be. And then Jasmine, because she loves food and cooking, she was like, well, how does the kitchen look? And he said, well, I think it's like 2035, it's not even that far away. Like, we'll all have robots and the robot will be able to scan you and determine what you're deficient in. And then he'll be able to go to whether it's a fridge, I don't even know at this stage. I guess if Beco are involved, it must have been a fridge, right? And then he'll be able to rustle you something up so that you get that need met, right? What you're deficient in. And then everyone will have a 3D printer in their home.
No.
That you'll then put like food to be printed, right? So she said, well, how does childhood look, right? And he said, well, the kids will all be in their rooms, but they won't all be with their mates in their rooms, but they won't actually be sitting with their mates. They have like, in a virtual sense, we used to see like, it was futuristic, but it was how meetings, people just pop up in the movies, like these sci-fi movies, and they're all sitting in their chairs, like virtual friends in there. That's how it would be in the bedroom. And they pretty much wouldn't leave the room because they're just getting their needs met within it, and they're socializing with them, they're gaming together. And then Jasmine's like, well, how do you get food to them? He said, well, you'd put the broccoli mix into the 3D printer and you print like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then you give it to them, and with their 3D goggles or whatever they're wearing, it comes to life, and then they're eating.
I hope this is the 20% part of where he's gotten it wrong.
I came away like that. I was like, well, the robot sounds quite cool. But,
like an assistant. Great.
Yeah, and then you can see the divergence of what that would be, because there's so many that actually want to refine their skills on not needing a robot, so they actually understand what their needs are and how they get their needs met versus by handing that over to a system, right?
It's also not too far away from what it is now, really, which is a bit more high tech. But, kids like locked up in their room, on their computers, on Discord or whatever it is, wearing a silly watch that's telling you like when you should be doing everything, rather than actually just being connected to your body and like feeling what it needs and being connected to what's actually around you to be able to sustain yourself. I mean,
we are already cyborgs. Like, really. The thing also
really
like that, like with the phones, like right now we're using this, we've got our phones, like everything's automated.
We're plugged in.
It's not that far like what Christabel was saying from how we are now. And I think it's about becoming so aware of how we're living and so conscious of our choices and so conscious of how are we relating with the natural world? How are we relating with ourselves? What are we feeding ourselves in like the full meaning of that word? Like what is coming into us and how are we relating outwardly? There's James Lovelock. Do you know who I mean by that? He wrote Gaia Theory. Came up with Gaia Theory, which is this idea of the earth as a self-regulating organism with the name Gaia.
Yep.
And because of Gaia Theory, like it's more than the sum of its parts, and you can't really separate things out. It's all part of a much bigger holistic ecological system.
Yeah.
So technology is also part of Gaia. And he wrote this kind of quite out there book, which I was so surprised he wrote, called The Novacene, and it was one of his last books before he died in his mid-90s, quite recently. And
Sorry, the
Novacene. He's got a very dystopian vision of the future, whereby like AI takes over, humanity dies out. But part of the book, he talks about like reframing how we see technology, so that, because right now technology is coming from within the paradigm of domination and power over but like is it possible to model it in an ecological way, to model it from the other paradigm? And like we're kind of too far gone for that to happen, probably. But
I don't think we
Don't
are.
say that, Ruby. Don't say that.
but like
Let's edit that bit out.
but that's
the Advaya stance.
That's why it's so destructive, technology, and why it's taking us so far away from real human ecological existence, because it's from this other paradigm.
Yeah, I have this romantic idea of it, because I always think that we were laughing about this at the weekend, because Lola and me, I bought them their first mobile phone, right? But it's a text and call phone only, like a Nokia, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
A snake on it.
Maybe. No, it has Tetris on it.
Fun.
And I was on it. I was like, gosh, it reminds me of when I used to have one of these. But they're cool with that, you know? Because, again, I guess they're not in the school environment and I have friends around me and family members around me where they've done it because they don't want their kids to feel like they're ostracized, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a strong feeling, that level of abandonment. That's hardwired in, right? It's a real survival thing.
Yeah.
But I do have this romantic idea about it where I bring in I can't remember who he says it to now. It's in Narnia. And have you seen any of those movies?
Yeah.
Yeah? And you know, Santa appears and he's just over the bridge. And they're all hiding underneath the bridge. And I think he just
Santa in
Santa.
Narnia.
Yeah.
You mean Tumnus, Mr. Tumnus?
No,
the fawn?
Santa, he's actually on a sleigh. And he
mean the
appears and he's
Wicked
got a coat and
Witch?
he's got a sack. And in the sack,
Not in Narnia.
in the sack are their weapons.
You're gonna have to fact check
You know,
this.
and he says, I think it's to Lucy, and he says, Lucy, this is for you, and it's a tool, not a toy. That's what he says, right? So I have this with the kids. It's a tool, not a toy. They don't have any games and any of that, and their creativity's through the roof, and they use tech in this sense for their fine art, for music, all of those, for languages, and they're just extraordinary. And their illustrations, they spend like a whole day on it. But because they're left to actually find full flow state and we don't interrupt it and we don't go, right, now you're going to English or now you're going here, I guess that need is met again, like that real creativity, and they're not then searching for something else.
Yeah.
But the tool, not a toy aspect of it, we could call it like foraging, for instance, right? I want to get back and be more in tune with the environment and learn how to forage again, so that I can become at one with the land and really understand. So I can use a foraging app to start with to get me going. It could be becoming bird watcher, and I can go, or understanding the trees or certain leaves or whatever it is. And even you can test the soil biodiversity through apps, right? And then there's, right, for Katerina, didn't quite work with Bowman, but she was using an app, right, for her cycles, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe like Green Day Tony or Red Day or whatever it was, you know? And then, but we somehow muddled it up and Bowman came into the world. He was definitely not on board with the tech at that stage. But then through that, Katerina had a much better understanding of a cycle, and to the point she doesn't use it now. So again, there's...
Exactly.
I guess there are ways that we can integrate it.
Totally.
That we can work with it. And it's...
Bio Komalafe talks about this in a really beautiful way, where the message that I receive from it is, you know, don't like ostracize technology and the digital from your life as though it's this sort of evil thing that is, you know, and like humans and nature are somehow, I mean, you focus more on humans, but like are above technology, you know, because you're just doing the same thing again, basically, of separation.
Yeah.
You know, how can you actually see it as something incredibly beautiful? And I think as soon as you bring consciousness and attention and gratitude and appreciation to anything, you know, whether it's coffee or even tobacco, or, you know, you can really start to interact with it with a lot more respect in a lot more healthier way. It's the total sort of, like, sometimes I feel it's a sort of shame thing. Like I can kind of notice myself, like, you know, if I'm like doom scrolling on Instagram and I'll be like, oh, I should really start my 15-minute day max timer. And I just like keep clicking it away. And I know I need to get off it, but I'm kind of like in this, like, fuck it. What, I don't know. It's like, it's
Like, how are we?
It's a projection
Are we
into it.
shutting down or are we opening up? I feel like that's that question for so many things. Like, is it serving us to live a fuller life, a more sensitized life, a more alive life, or the opposite?
I'm an addict, so for me, it's if I'm suffering, upregulated, overwhelmed, it's a terrible thing to be in my hands, right? But it also then highlights, you're overwhelmed, you're suffering. So the moment I get this feeling in there, just keep going, then I already know that there's something out. So it becomes, it's a trigger, but also I can recognize, why am I suffering? What needs aren't being met right now?
Yeah.
In that physical, social, and spiritual kind of context of what they might be, right?
Yeah, it's always a very particular space I'm in when that's happening. And it's like this sort of absolute no energy, but mind out of control. And it's like, just need to look at something else but my life right now.
Dopamine in the main vein, and I'll be okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Earth.co.
Yay.
So can I?
Yeah.
Sorry, before I go in there. Going back to that run and trying to find the why. So when I first came off the panel that day, and then I returned home, I had a bit of time, bit of breathing space, even after the festival. Katarina's went off back home to Slovakia and then on to Vienna to see family. And I had the whole house to myself. I mean, I was rattling around in this house. To start with, it's great. It's like lovely. And then that solitude really goes into loneliness. And there might have been just a little bit of scrolling, but I did manage. Just a little. I did manage because I didn't have the noise of Bowman and Tallulah coming in. I love that stuff. I did manage to lie down for a whole day. And who did I message you or did I message you? I can't remember now.
Me.
Yeah, it was you. Yeah. Because
on Instagram when you
was it on Instagram? There you go. I was suffering on a social level, you see. I was trying to get that social need met. Yeah. But it was this Earth.co I was attracted to because it felt like, oh wow, this is like an opportunity to, tick the environmental box, but personal planetary health, I could tick that box by maybe for next year for an event, was to steer people towards that. Because normally it's about raising funds, but this is an opportunity to perhaps donate, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time, what I loved about it is they're not just donating, they're tapping into a huge educational platform, really, in that sense, right? Which is why I've also, to learn in a minute, it's like, take a look at this. This is extraordinary.
Yeah, we'll give them full access to it all. So we first grew out of, it's like very much part of like the journey that Ruby and I have been on. And it must have been 2019, so 4 years into Advaya. Advaya was getting it was increasingly like dropping down and becoming, niche isn't the right word, but like deep and like a real like deep collective inquiries. And we loved the kind of language that we use, which isn't a very accessible language, but it doesn't need to be. Like, it doesn't have to be mainstream. And so whilst we were cultivating and nurturing that, we started to wonder, rather than trying to make this more mainstream, how can we create, more like broader impact and start to take a more mainstream audience, as in people not already plugged into the ecological spiritual crises on a journey. And we started Eco-Resolution with Cara Delevingne, and it was about leveraging celebrity networks. Sorry, not networks, leveraging celebrity platforms in order to talk about, the ecological and mental health and climate and social justice crises, and about how each of us could daily take action. So we did this it was all on Instagram, and it was before there were any other big like Instagram sort of accounts. Like there probably were, and I just wasn't following
climate accounts, like big,
And so we started, and the idea was you do like hashtag my eco-resolution is to XYZ. It's like really like now, but anyway, at the time it worked really well. But then 6 months in, suddenly it was a lot of, my eco-resolution is to stop using plastic straws, or is to do this or do that. And I think suddenly I just felt like there wasn't the depth, like that. it's too much in the sphere. Like, it's not taking people on a real journey. Anyway, we, from that and from everything we learned in Advaya and then through Eco Resolution, we ended up setting up a charity. It's under the umbrella Initiative Earth. And what we wanted to do is, rather than talk about the crisis and talk to people as though they are consumers, how can we talk to people as though they are active citizens and participants of this life? How can we create a platform where anyone can access the skills they need? We call them nature skills, in order to go out into their local environments and get their hands in the soil or in the rivers, wherever it is, and start actively restoring their local environment. So the way Earth works now is that you go onto the platform. We currently have 10 courses, but we've got 40 we've produced. We're just like drip feeding them every 2 weeks. So we've got everything from earth shipbuilding to river restoration to coral reefs to urban growing. What soon will coming out is everything from like wildfire defense to combating desertification. I mean, it's very broad, very global. We'll be translating into multiple languages. So when you're part of the platform, you can access these beautifully shot courses, community networks, and then your member donations support the charity. 15% supports the teachers. And what we hope to do is, as we grow and the members join, say we can get to, this is a big dream, 200,000 members doing...
Dream big.
Yeah, 200,000 members, £4 a month is 9.7 million a year. So we can give, a significant amount of money to be evenly distributed between all the teachers. The charity, we don't have to be out there on the grind, fundraising all the time. Charity can be supported. And then 70%, so nearly £7 million will be going into a fund that will be resourcing the grassroots, mass mobilized, peer-driven ecosystem restoration movement. And we hope to engage members in doing like participatory grant giving. And so it's all trust-based. So that's where we're headed.
Boom.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, that's the vision, right?
Yeah. Ecosystem restoration is where it is at.
It really...
Well, and us within that and understanding the custodian part within that, right?
Yeah.
I have like on the NatLife coach cert, and it's the, why are we here? Why are you here? Well, we're custodians.
Yeah. We really wanted to also bring people together. And during COVID times, we realized increasingly people were becoming in these little encampments.
Yeah.
And it's very, very, very hard to communicate at a stage where we become so polarized in our opinions and our ways of thinking. And that's being used, it's being almost unintentionally by the way that these algorithms are working. And so we wanted to really bring people together by moving beyond the analysis of the problems or the reasons why we're in this situation that we are, and really move towards active participatory engagement, getting hands in soil, really going right down to basics, which in our opinion is exactly what we need to do. And it's not complicated what needs to happen. Like, we don't need really high tech things to suck carbon out the air. We just need to
restore the nature so it can breathe it all in.
Yeah. And like, how can we empower one another to grow our own food, and in the process build community and get together with our neighbors and share the joy of doing that, and share the joy of cooking a meal and sharing a meal and learning from each other and learning from our elders and teaching other people the things we know. And it's just such a, for me, like an
inspiring model.
Yeah, and an exciting proposition. And when I read the newspapers, it's like, feels like we're at the end of the world. Like, the story of the Anthropocene's just like been dominating for so long now, and it's not serving anything. It's just getting us more and more stuck. Yeah, on the one part, falling into these polarization, a desire to blame, a feeling of a victim, but also this kind of stasis, overwhelm, apathy. And then in that, we can fall into dangerous patterns. And I'd be nervous for the future of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't serve us and doesn't serve others in that position of real overwhelm.
Yeah, and humanity isn't a virus. Humanity is part of nature. The system of domination, like there is a certain part of the system that we're part of, which is a virus. But humanity isn't a virus. And we have to recognize humanity as like a beautiful part of the world. And
Yeah. It's almost like going, but like the technology thing, you know, it's like technology, digital is so bad. And it's like, I feel like that perpetuates the issues within technology. It's same with humanity. It's like humans are just so terrible. Take them off the land, you know, let the land be free of humans so it can heal. And it's like, no, humans are like ecosystem engineers. And I think one of the things that inspired us so much was during lockdown, there was a lot of sort of turning on the farmers as the farmers being the problem. And then we were reading like survival. We were doing an interview with Stephen, who's our director of
Stephen Curry.
Yeah, thanks, of Survival International. And anyways, reading this paper, and it was saying how, you know, I think it's like really well known now, but in the Amazon, you know, it's been discovered that the most is so fertile because of the millions of indigenous people that used to live there, and they were farming, and that's why it's so biodiverse. And then you compare that story of humanity with the story of, you know, we should really be growing our food in labs and doing vertical agriculture, because humans clearly cannot feed themselves and also restore the and live in like a regenerative way. And that was such an amazing moment of that. Really, it's like the deep push
realization
behind Earth. And actually, similarly with Advaya, you know, you're starting to learn about these things. And you're like, where is the platform for these people, for us to be able to celebrate, honor, and revere these amazing teachers,
or amplify their voices?
Exactly, but also to be learning from them. And I think, you know, there's an, you know, increasingly incredible solidarity with Indigenous peoples, but sometimes I feel a little bit like it's falling flat because, you know, you're supporting, you're amplifying, you're doing what you can, but that, you know, they're saying like Indigenous people, you know, protecting 80% of the biodiversity. Well, learn, like, how can you protect biodiversity in, you know, this, what pressure on, I mean, like, not saying that they're resisting it, but it's like, you know, like, really, if you're going to be celebrating someone, learn from them, in like, try and imbibe that knowledge, try and learn about the indigenous ways of your own locality and the ways that people used to farm in harmony with the natural world where you live, or learn from other cultures, what, you know, whatever's going to work to actually move you to stop being a mouthpiece. And I think, you know, what Ruby was saying as well, there's so much talk, and I think we are all becoming increasingly adept at talking about the problem. But I mean, I grew my first vegetable like this year. Thank you, Earth, for teaching me, because I didn't know, and it got to a point where I was a bit embarrassed that I didn't like actually know. And I have been so shocked about how little I knew about seeds, and just actually how little I ever thought about it.
Yeah, it resonates. I was blown away by that, you know, the 5% of the world's population being indigenous and looking after 80% of the world's biodiversity. And then my question was, well, what the fuck what are we doing?
Yeah.
What's 95% of us doing?
Yeah.
And why aren't we looking, you know, to indigenous cultures and thinking, well, how is it they're managing to maintain this? And what wisdom is there, and what can we learn? And mine is always, at the very beginning, was always coming through physical practices, right? How we move naturally, and how does that look in nature? And then I got really curious around what sleep looks like. It was driving me nuts, all the sleep studies, always done in a laboratory and smashing 8 hours out. And we wouldn't be here today if we all slept for 8 hours, you know, out if you strip all this back. Predators, hostile environments. Yeah, I'm just going to go sleep for 8 hours. You know, who's going to wake up after that? I'd probably be devoured. And then it kept going. And yeah, I think once I started to look at that as an environmental kind of, what's the environment that we get to move in, what we get to sleep in, that's the stadium, right?
Yeah.
For all those physical acts. And then what does that look like?
Yeah.
And how has that been maintained throughout time and is still demonstrated today, 5%? So if you can not just amplify voices, but yeah, bring that, shine a light on that, that's huge. I did a fair amount with Survival International. I ran the 3 peaks, and then was raising awareness for that. Again, amplifying the voice and bringing awareness to it. But again, it's sometimes so far removed for people. And it's how do we then bring that message home? It's like, what do we do with that? They actually just contacted my assistant today, said to me, oh, Tony, Survival International want you to run the London Marathon for them next year. So we just agreed to
How
that
funny.
today. There
That's
you go.
funny
Yeah,
coincidence.
just dropped in.
Yeah. And I think recognizing as well the ancestral traditions of the lands in which you find yourself and not needing to appropriate from others necessarily.
Fine line between the cultural appreciation and the cultural appropriation, right?
Because we all have indigenous heritages, like far back in many cases. And how can we find a way to learn about those and reevaluate how we can incorporate our lives?
It's the missing piece. I was just discussing this with Seth just a couple of weeks back on the previous podcast. Yeah, it feels like we're getting there now, with like the indigenous piece of these lands and reconnecting to it. But it feels that, again, even like think of the medicine circles, that created an awakening. Like we need to take this medicine to the West, and then through that there's been an awakening that is then starting to reconnect us to our own indigenous lands, right?
It's interesting as well in the context of the British Isles, of the place where we are right now, in that it's been colonized for such a long time. Like Manda Scott talks about waking up from the post-Roman nightmare.
Yeah, I've done the whole Boudica series.
Yeah, and she pins it on the Roman invasion and the impact that had. Or you could say it was the witch trials and the witch hunts. It's like final colonization of the ancestral wisdom but it is still alive. It is still in the land. And Cara Wynne talks about dreaming with the land and it being like an intuitive connection. And because the traditions we don't have written down, we don't have writing, we don't have a testimony to these things necessarily. It is much more intuitive. We are kind of making it up to a certain extent. Like even Sharon Blackie, like the Druids have their practices, but they are also like intuitive to a certain extent. There are very few Celtic practices, like actual practices that are still alive. We have stories, but we don't have practices necessarily, or many
which
of
is
them.
that piece about waking up from the
it's
the post-Roman trauma, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very powerful that when you think of that, when you hear it, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, what came in? Imagine how that must have been. What that must have been like for the people of the lands.
Yeah.
Losing that real deep connection and something else coming thrust in like that. How brutal even that must be. We lived in a place called Fitzheads in Somerset, and there's areas around Somerset now that are being developed. So you see the farmers' fields now being turned into housing, let's say. And yet it's quite jarring to see it. But can you imagine what it must have been like when we had forests that were then being flattened? What that must have been like at periods of time for us. Losing lands in that sense.
Yeah. I think I've found through Advaya, and then in the last 8-10 years, so much with it, like a lot of perpetuation of the issues and the trauma, but a lot of deep appreciation for indigeneity and wanting to learn, and listening to like more like mainstream like radio shows and podcasts, and hearing people keep going back to like ancestry and lineage, and it's really present. And I really hope that in the same way that it's about sort of how we live, or about, in the spiritual, like around the stories and that side, we can also now move into this other phase of, and how have these incredible communities still to this day lived in a way which is not only providing nourishment to themselves and their community and to spirit, but is also providing nourishment for all life forms and for the more than human all around, and getting really practical. This I sometimes have like a twinge around storytelling, and Charles Eisenstein's work around we need a new story. Sometimes I wonder, is that actually the last thing we need? Like, do we need no story? Is story maybe the problem that is like, the story of the growth-based economy, the story of you're not good enough, all the different stories. Obviously you have good ones as well, but nevertheless you are living slightly detached from reality in the mind and projection. And I think then to sort of spiritual activism and the Bhagavad Gita and, these practices that actually say, and I guess in shamanism as well, which is actually to move beyond the mind and move beyond story. And it actually suddenly feels like a bit more of a lower way to be interacting, and just to be able to clear the mind so that you see so clearly, and so that your action is so rooted in clarity that you are acting in a way that is not going to be creating more harm. And what we see in the climate and ecological space now are all these false solutions, which are very much built on seemingly very positive and exciting stories. And I think in our lifetime, we're going to really witness that. So I don't know what got me on that path, but I feel very strongly about it.
It's like, I understand what you're saying, but I think it's also about worldview, not just like, I think there's story and narrative, but then there's worldview. And so like, I love how you're talking about like just dropping back and thinking about like how we relate with the world around us, but within a worldview of interconnectedness. But
I think if you're seeing completely clearly, you see the interconnectedness. Like, you don't need a story around it because you're just experiencing it.
Yes. You're being it. There's the embodiment again.
You're just
that comes
living
into
like
that.
everything, because all the deep messages that are needing to be conveyed through story are reality in a way. Like, the world is magic. You have this embodied existence, and you don't. There's just finite.
And then there are transformative experiences that can open the view onto that worldview, or onto that ontological experience,
which probably makes transformative experience transformative, because they don't remain in the narrative story. They do something so much deeper within.
Yeah. And I don't think that they have to be like high dose psychedelics. I think that they can also be like time in the forest or in the water or in the where you suddenly see the fullness of life, like going back full circle to how we started the conversation.
Back to lying on the rock.
Yeah.
And it, the thing about the story, or again, I speak to this a lot about being information rich and experience poor. That we are in a world where we're just bombarded by information, but it's then how much are we integrating within ourselves, right? And that can only come through actual moments of lying on the rock and processing what we may have gone through, or the transformative process that we've been through. Otherwise, it becomes almost like the next transformative experience, the next one, the next one, the next one, and that, without actually really sitting in, embodying it, and then tuning into, well, how is that enabling me to integrate or to reconnect to the fact that it is all interconnected to begin with.
And when it becomes problematic is when these experiences remain in the consumption paradigm, like what you were just referencing there, is like when they reinforce our sense of selves rather than enabling us to see beyond them into the fullness of things. Because then you get the problems that we're seeing a lot with these spaces around like guru cults, spiritual narcissism, like extreme polarized like conspirituality, abuse,
extractive behavior with psychedelics.
Yeah. So there's
what's the extractive behavior?
That's all you're being serious.
So I think it's not like any type of consumption of a peak experience will take us to that place. I think there's like a level of awareness that you need to go into that into it, and it's like, what's at the root of our actions that are taking us there.
Yeah, I think there's like two parts there. I just want to like riff off that. I think
I like this riffing.
I think a big thing that I would love for myself and for, people around the world to be doing is to be taking all of their information that they have a lot of and channeling that into experience, as in not experiences that are removed from their day-to-day life, but experience, like building the community, like reweaving that fabric in alignment with the experiences. Because I think now you need to separate, to go to a retreat, to have these incredible experiences, because you need to actually disconnect from the patterns that you're in. But I think if we're not then taking it back, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about, narrative, not narrative shift, perspective shifting, relational work through Advaya, how we relate to ourselves, to each other, to spirit, to nature, but then grounding it with earth, with like, well, here are practical skills. This is how you can mobilize community. This is how you transform disused spaces. This, we need to be doing that, because I think there's so much apathy and, this big phrase around climate anxiety. I mean, I've always been a very anxious person. I wonder how I would have experienced anxiety as a teenager if I'd understood about climate anxiety or was even thinking about the climate then. But I think that, in the news, I think it's something crazy, like 98% of all media reporting on the climate and ecological crisis is reporting on the problem. Only 2% is reporting on the solution, which is insane, and also a very clear representation and mirror to why people feel so apathetic and so overwhelmed and so anxious, because we can literally restore our world, like everything, like as in nature, everything we need to do, it can be done in a peer-driven, mass mobilized way, but we just need the mass mobilized part, and this constant sort of shifting power away from ourselves because it feels so overwhelming, waiting for governments to do it, feeling so disappointed and so angry with them, channeling all our energy into being really angry, which we ought to be feeling angry. But we also must use that.
That just serves as a distraction away from what we could actually be
if
committing
you're not
to doing.
rooting it down. So, I hope, after some incredible years of, I feel like, a lot of awareness raising and movement building, that, and which I really feel like was kind of climaxing during lockdown, and because everything was so online and suddenly such a global awareness and communication, to start to actually root that down. And it was beautiful being at Planet Local on the weekend, Helena Norberg's-Hodge's event with Local Futures. And, there was a lot of really heavy stuff, heady stuff, but then there was also many, many people who were just doing the work on the grassroots level. And I think on the community level, like getting practical and solution oriented. And then it's exciting. And that's what we should be teaching children about, is about all of the different ways that we can live in harmony with ourselves.
Yeah, well, you are doing that.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
You're doing that. That's
No, we need to start another business.
That's why it's there, right? I always see it as I'm going to repeat myself because I brought it up in the last podcast, but for me, it always feels like there's a handing over of a baton, and we run our best leg of this experience we call life. And then we hand the baton over to the next generations, and there's that. It's like you're raising incredible awareness already. You're bringing amazing voices forward to speak to it. I think there is that removing the overwhelm and the distraction of all the noise, which will play a huge part. Because if we think of that 5% of the world population being indigenous, again, going back to that, and there's 80% of the world's biodiversity, they're the custodians in that sense, there isn't the distraction. Their needs are also met on that physical, social, spiritual level. And then bringing the physical piece in, I always go into David Goggins talking about we're only ever operating at 40%. So the very first podcast I really got into was a guy called Jesse Itzler, and he was on Rich Roll. First time I kind of come across Rich Roll. And then Jesse was talking about how he moved this Marine into his house, and his name's David Goggins. And David Goggins is in his basement, and David Goggins also has the record for the amount of pull-ups you can do in 24 hours. Some ridiculous number, right? And Jesse Itzler writes this book. It's called Living with the Seal, and it's his whole experience, this guy who's kind of driven by trauma, really, school trauma and being raised. He becomes this incredible endurance beast. But anyways, I'm back to Jesse Itzler's basement. And he said, show me any pull-ups you can do. And he does a number of pull-ups. Jesse Itzler's there, and he's like pumped, and he thinks he can't possibly do any more. And David Goggins said, well, you're not leaving till you give me, I can't remember, some silly number, maybe 100. And he locks the door, tells him you're not leaving till you give me that. And he's like, what? And he basically unpacks, like the Navy SEALs, you're only ever operating at 40%.
No.
Yeah.
So if we really mobilized, right, not just the physical self, our potential of what we can be doing physically, but if we mobilized on that level and thought, wow, if we're only operating at 40% in the physical sense, what about social sense and spiritual sense? What could the world look like on that interdependent level? Because you can't say that the seagull flying around out there is only ever operating at a percentage. It's just being what it is in that environment. You know, Vaughan, for instance, we were on his boat in Ibiza, right? By the way, it's not like a huge yacht. It's a little rib.
That was what was in my head.
And we were going around on Vaughan's little rib.
Canoe.
And there might have been an element of microdosing something anyway. But we were on the rib, and his brother was there, Glenn. And Glenn was quite techie. And Glenn starts flying around. He was talking about his drone. You know, that's so amazing. That was it. Drones had only just come on the market, and he was like blown away by drones. One of the first people to get it, and talking about it. And then we were like, and he said, "I can't believe how amazing it is that we've managed to design this thing that can fly around like that." We're like, "There's a bird up there." You know, doing its thing. Like,
something that I wanted to
fully interconnected.
But like something that we talked about 40% of our capacity, and then thinking about what you were saying about playing an active role. It was just making me think though as well. It's like it's not just about us. It's not just about me or you saving the world, but it's just about living our lives in the best way possible in alignment with our values and our beliefs.
Yeah.
And enabling other people around us to do the same, and as a collective having an amazing, beautiful impact and a beautiful thing. And it's like there's an element, I think, of humility that we need to take into this work.
Yeah.
And it's not about me. It's not about me.
You're not showing us your 41%.
No. No, just letting go of these ideas that are part of the problem, part of the reason why we're in this situation that we're in. It's like this narrative of the hero's journey, the individual conquering, saving the world, me being better than you, my way of doing things better than your way of doing things, my story being the story that we all need to believe in, at the expense of the other. And then we stay in this binary way of living. And actually, maybe if we have this ecological worldview, understanding ecological reciprocity and ecological relationality, and it's like with freediving, I used to freedive a lot, and you just have to relax.
Yeah.
And that's how you freedive, is by relaxing. And the more you relax, the longer you can hold your breath and the deeper you can dive. And it's not even about how big a breath you take at the beginning. It's just about how good you are at relaxing and letting yourself drop. And I feel it's like, just because it's not about like pushing beyond 40% of our capacity. It's like we naturally can fulfill our human potential if we don't get in our own way.
Yeah.
That's so nice. Because
really showing up,
yeah,
I would say.
Yeah.
And something that I was picking up on, but like from a different perspective, was when you were speaking, it's like our human potential is always there, but it's about we put in front of us obstacles all the time,
or lids on.
And I think it's such a shift in perspective around sort of change making or whatever you're trying to do. It's like, rather than me trying to do all this stuff, or us all having to do all this stuff, how can we remove the obstacles that are preventing us from being these embodied and wild and actively participating people? And I love what you're saying as well, Ruby, because it's not about saving the world. And I think that makes it feel like a really big thing to do and makes it really exclusive, because there's, there might be like, a small percentage of people who are like, yeah, I'm up for that task. But then the rest of people are like,
show me
what?
the telephone box to go get changed in, and I'll give you a quick spin. Out they come.
Exactly. And then you see so much, ego and careerism and stuff in then the well-being.
Or in even the spiritual superiority that comes through.
Yeah,
right?
and it's just, when you're speaking about the bird, it's something that I think about a lot, where I did a thesis on the Bhagavad Gita, reading it as an ecological treatise, and I went down like a rabbit hole around free will because I was wondering whether humans
Was this one of those ones where you're in your room as a teenager smoking weed? Or were you...
It actually was. No, you did. No.
Yeah, no, but I was at university too.
Oh, okay, all right.
I did an MA at SOAS. Anyway, yeah, so free will. And I was reflecting on the fact that we associate free will as being able to do whatever we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that gives us power. But then you see a bird that is so deeply connected with their intuition and isn't like, maybe I'll like, fuck off flying today and I'm going to go and to the mall and shop, or you know what I mean? Like it's like, or start destroying the environment. Like it's just totally in its flow. But then someone might look at that bird and think, God, I'm so much wiser and I have so much free will and so much more power because I'm able to do all these other things. But then all of those other things are actually completely disconnecting you from the source of your power, which is to be in complete alignment with your sacred duty and your intuition and your clarity and focus of mind. And I think that's such an, like, I don't know, it comes up, even it's been like 10 years since I did that. And I think about it all the time, like to be completely present and connected with your sacred duty, as Pat McKay says, to uphold the honor of being human being, like the bird upholds the honor of being bird. Like it's such a shift in our understanding of power and also an understanding of our human potential, where it's about removing the obstacles, whether they're in your mind or these self-imposed limitations. And the last thing I'll say on this is it's also the big thing kind of behind the thinking behind Earth is that if we had access to skills, networks and funds, space is another one, big one, but we're not doing space right now. Skills, networks and funds, if you have access to this, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not billions of people who want to be living off the land in a self-sustaining, community-oriented, nature-celebrating way. But they're being made by systems to not live in that way because it's very, very hard to do that. We're seeing it now. Lots of amazing, inspiring people I know are doing amazing, inspiring things, but they have quite a lot of wealth that they've amassed to give this freedom of exploration. And that is absolutely not to say that those are the only people. There's many more people who are doing it who actually don't have that privilege as well. I don't think it's just a thing of privilege, but it just makes you realize, if we shift the framework from like a scarcity mindset about the amount of people who are wanting to participate in this great transformation to thinking actually everyone does, because everyone wants to be happy and healthy. We just can remove the obstacles that are preventing everyone from participating in that life.
Yeah, it's like it's allowing it to become much more inclusive rather than seeing it as an exclusive thing. I think that the rewilding kind of land went down that path, right?
Yeah.
I don't like the word privilege. I think because we're all hugely privileged. We're privileged to be alive, right? And privileged to be able to breathe and walk, and some can't walk, some can't run. But I feel it doesn't matter where anyone is on that spectrum. Again, if the simplest needs aren't met, then they're suffering. And it's the suffering then that leads to the distraction and the wanting to fill the void rather than the being able to connect to that grassroots or that ground to take up the practice, right? Yeah. How do we make it more inclusive in that sense? Which is what you're doing. Yeah. 100%.
Trying.
Not trying, you're doing. I think doing. I think it's like, kudos.
Thank you.
To what you're doing. Where can people find you?
Kudos to you quickly as well, because I think one of the things that I loved so much about being on the 100 Human Experience, and I took our little sister with us who's having like a difficult time, and I loved how different and inclusive it felt to be there, because I don't know, I feel like sometimes those spaces can be like very sort of like serious, and it just felt so full of play and love and acceptance, and I felt like no one was playing a well-being role in like a well-being space, you know.
Well, we were bridging the gap between wellness as an industry and wellness as a state of being.
And it was also so nice to see so many men in those spaces as well, in spaces that are often so actually dominated by women. And I think to have such a beautiful mix, it just felt so wonderful.
I'm always surprised by that. I mean, my stats for the podcast, for Instagram, for events even, I'd say we're at a 50-50 percentage.
Amazing.
Right? Which is incredible.
It's really, it's really rare.
The last few have been, the age range has been phenomenal, like 20s through to 70 pluses, you know. That's also quite something. And then also what I voiced to, I kind of like people on the bus versus people that are at the bus stop. And then we also have people that aren't aware there's a bus or a bus stop, and you hold their hand and you take them. And that's really incredible. And everyone again becomes so interconnected that you can really feel it over a weekend like that. But the play aspect is, you know, that's what underpins it. I love the play. And again, it's an opportunity to imagine ourselves in a completely different position to where we are. We all get stuck, don't we? You know, who doesn't get stuck? You know, put your hand up if you get stuck. Put your hand up if you get really low. You know, and it's like, and everyone will do that. And then it's like, okay, but if we work with these practices, suddenly it becomes much lighter and we can find the joy again. And I think that's such an important part of those weekends. But I guess also the work, you know, in the circles, it's so serious, you know, like in the circles, like the medicine circles, whatever, we're so serious here of doing the work.
Finding the joy.
You know, it's putting the injection of play back into it, and you're doing deep work, but you're also taking the edges off it. You know,
we both, like Dr. David Luke talks about how I don't know in what culture or even when it is, but it's an amazing thing where they have these sort of like clown police that police the humor and seriousness of the society, of the community. And so if people are being too serious, they'll come and they'll be like start clowning and making everyone laugh. And then if they're being too silly and like not like paying attention, they'll become like very sort of more, I guess, the modern day police stereotype, I imagine. But yeah, you wanna literally play between the spectrum of taking things really seriously, being able to drop in, and then also being a lot lighter and playful, because I think this space of activism can be sometimes people take everything so intensely serious, and I think it becomes really inaccessible because everyone feels so scared to try and have a conversation because there is so little sort of scope for lighter contributions in order to. Because I feel like I learn through talking, I learn through sharing, I learn through doing. And I think right now there's this sort of projection of you need to have it all sorted, all figured out and all ironed out before you take to a platform, especially if you have a big platform, in order to start sharing. And I think that's such a sad thing. And I really hope that this ecological movement does not become divorced from the movement for freedom and liberation, which I think needs to be like sitting at the heart of it. I just want it to be as inclusive.
Remaining curious.
Curiosity. Yeah, that's in the playful language, isn't it? I was just thinking about Ibiza again, and I was walking on the beach with Nick Mulvey in Calanova. We were strolling along. He said, I've got to introduce you to this guy. And we started talking to this guy, and he said, he's got amazing retreat space in Brazil, and they're doing a lot of work. And we were talking, and I was just about to go and have an experience somewhere. And he said, what is that? Is that Kambo? You know, working with Kambo medicine. For those that don't know, it's a frog. The venom is extracted and they burn points on, and that can cleanse your whole lymphatic system. You can go deep with the medicine. It usually involves vomiting in a bucket quite profusely. So he started to discuss that, and then the next thing is like, you know, it's so interesting in the West, isn't it, how serious we are with all this work. He said, did you know that the Cambo, traditionally what these guys will do now is they'll be lining up, and instead of us like being sick over a bucket, the guys line up and they see who can projectile vomit the furthest. But they're laughing about it and they're fun, you know?
Yeah.
That's something, isn't it?
That's a life. That's the dream.
I held a retreat and I brought Cambo in and we were sitting round and again quite serious at that time. But lightness came in. My friend, I'm not going to name her, but she won't mind me telling this story anyway. And we were sitting in a circle and everyone's over their bucket doing their thing and clearing their lymphatic system. We weren't projectile vomiting, it was indoors. And my friend just suddenly got up and she walked out the room. And then she came back in and she brought that humour in and the joy in it, completely transformed the room. She went, "Oh my God, I've been shitting myself about shitting myself all my life. And having just shit myself, I wonder what the shit I was shitting myself about." There we go.
You have not sold Cambo to me.
I'm just softly just bringing it in for you. Okay, let's ready to wrap things up, really, right?
Yeah, great note to end on.
Yeah.
Really sums up the conversation.
It does, doesn't it? It just, Yeah. I had a whole thing around shit that I wrote. Should I read it to you?
Should we just keep going?
Let's not wrap things up at all. I was on a bit of a shit one, so I just went down this path. Steps of enlightenment. Step 1, disconnected, feeling shit, but not recognising your own shit. Step 2 was frustration, recognising your own shit, but rather than dealing with your own shit, being a shit by complaining about everyone else's shit.
Oh, yeah.
Step 3, compassion, understanding your own shit and where it came from, and will have empathy for where the shit came from that others are experiencing too. Step 4, being the change, wanting to heal all the shit so younger generations won't have to feel shit no more. 5, being so experienced with shit that you don't own shit. We are experiencing all the shit. You need shit to happen to build even bigger shit. Your shit smells too.
Your 10 Commandments.
Beautiful.
How was that? Don't say shit. Where can people find you?
They can find Advaya at advaya.life, ADVAYA, Advaya.
Which means, again?
Non-duality.
Interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Interconnectedness. Yeah, lovely.
And then earth.co, like earth-ed, earth-ed, earth.co. And that's for the nature school courses and it's donation-based. And yeah, advaya.life is also more 6-week-long, kind of long, deep journeys that we go on.
Great. So good to have you.
So great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Hang around a little longer.
Yeah, definitely.
Great for Lola and Millie to kind of have a little chat, I believe.
So nice.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Much love to you. Tradition is we all hug. Is that cool?
Yeah.
I'll come then. We got this side.
Don't we need 8 hugs? Like what you say.
4 hugs for survival, 8 hugs for maintenance, and 12 hugs for growth.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I smashed in 100 in like 1 hour on can we all get in here? Can we do that, Simon? We can do like well, you can do that. It looks really cool. Look at that. Oh. Thank you. Thank us.
Thank God.
Thank us. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you feel drawn to do so, then please subscribe to the show, leave a review, and don't forget to share. Sharing is caring. It really helps me to help others. If you're drawn to immersing yourself in any of the NatLife experiences or see yourself as a NatLife coach, head to tonyriddle.com for details of how to immerse yourself in the community. You can follow my adventures on Instagram at The Natural Lifestylist. Big shout out to Simon from We Are the Clarks for producing, filming, editing. Much love.